I guess to kind of start off with, let's talk about the team. This is like a big Bruin reunion, it feels like, with Jonathan, Maria. I mean, it's a bunch of UCLA cats getting together to make this film. Did it start out like that? Is that your regular team, or how did this kind of all come about?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate your noticing the team behind it, because it wouldn't have happened without the relationships that we had formed at UCLA and the previous projects that we've done together. I produced Maria and Jonathan's thesis films at UCLA, which played in a lot of festivals. Maria's was at Sundance. Jonathan and Maria produced and AD'd my thesis film, which played at Tribeca. And we did some really challenging work. We made a short film that was shot entirely at sea on a sailboat in Los Angeles Harbor on 35 millimeter. That was a student film. We shot, my thesis film had some big scenes in downtown Los Angeles and in a newsroom. So we've just supported each other in taking these risks to make our crazy visions try to make their way to the screen. Also, our DP, our cinematographer, is not a UCLA alum, but he shot one of our thesis films, a guy named Eric Leach, who's really talented, and we had worked with him on 35 millimeter. So we started Thrasher Road assuming we were going to do digital, because that's just what you do now. But I always secretly wanted to do it on film because I felt it fit the aesthetic, and Eric ended up sort of advocating for film because of the conditions we were shooting in, which is a lot of excessive heat, where he had seen digital cameras malfunction in desert shoots, and we were in Mississippi and across Arizona through the summer. So that was possible because we had all worked together on film in the past and sort of had confidence that we could pull that off as well. So,
what made you guys... the Super 16 shot.
Super 16.
Yeah, what made you go with that avenue? And, one of the shots that I love, the Grand Canyon shots, came out beautiful.
Thank you.
Tell me a bit about deciding on Super 16 and about those landscape shots, because I think you guys capture a lot of what other people aren't looking for in a road trip movie. You have an aesthetic to the film based on simply the location choices y'all made, which is really cool.
Thank you. I've driven cross country a lot, and I just love the American landscape so passionately, and so many important events in my life have happened when I've gone on the road, and I just see the world in a different way, and I'm reminded of the beauty out there. Making this film now in a time when people are so distracted by screens, I felt a special mission to remind them of all this beauty out in the world, because I think when you absorb that, it helps you see yourself in a different way. So I wanted all the locations to be authentic. We did a little bit of shooting in Mississippi that was sort of passing for Kansas or Arizona, but I wanted that open Western feeling, and the Grand Canyon is legitimately the Grand Canyon, and it was a scramble to get that shot. I'll tell you, we had to permit it and do all the proper things and pray for good weather and all that, and then we thought we had 2 hours to shoot, but there were big wildfires in Los Angeles, and the smoke clouds were blowing east, and we realized that sunset was going to be basically an early sunset because there was so much dark smoke on the western horizon coming from LA. So we had to really scramble to get that shot, but it just kind of came together, and I love it too. We've had people ask if it's green screened, because they say it's like, looks so beautiful. I'm like, no, we were really there. We didn't do any green screening, and we were shooting on film, and we wanted everything to be just viscerally real in the place where we were. Another example was there's an important scene to me that's kind of a redemptive cleansing scene for the father, Mac, on the banks of the Mississippi River, and he's lying on the hood of the car, you might remember, and that's the Mississippi, right there on the just south of the bridge to Helena, Arkansas, and we snatched that scene. We'd been intending to shoot it somewhere else. The weather wasn't cooperating, but it was just responding to what nature was giving us and the light and the landscape. And we were in the middle of lunch, and I saw it, and I said, everybody get up, get your equipment. Come on, Chris, we're going to shoot that scene. Because I wanted just that feeling of the softness after a southern rainstorm, and that particular feeling on your skin of that kind of moisture, the sort of forgiving softness of that moment. So that was kind of the spirit that we had all the way across the country, and we also filmed up in New England as well, where I wanted to sort of achieve a different kind of environment where there's the saturated colors and the green in contrast to that desert, dryness where the father and daughter first re-encounter each other.
Where did this story come from? Was it always within mind that it would be a pregnant lead? I know I asked Allison about when she first got the prosthetic and about that first day of trying it on. But where did this story come from?
That's always the mystery, right?
Yeah.
Many sources, I'd say. So we've talked about, the relationship to the road, which is personal for me. People ask if it's autobiographical, which it's not, but there is one seed of truth in that my father did once drive my car with my dog in it across the country for me, but I wasn't on that road trip with him. I think becoming a parent, I had very little children when I first wrote the script, and I think I got interested in the ways that we can't really fully understand our parents, well, maybe ever, but certainly until we step into becoming parents and we realize how complicated it is and how often we get it wrong, even if we have the best intentions. So I wanted to explore that and really kind of look at, my parents were divorced, and I think, so many of the people working on the cast and crew had personal experiences they brought to making the film. We talked so much about the content of what are the stories you learn from each of your parents compared to your own experience, how do you put that together, and that the rubber hits the road when you take that step into trying to be an adult yourself, trying to keep a relationship going, becoming a parent, and how unprepared you can feel for that step in your life when you're carrying into it unfinished business from your own childhood. So at the emotional heart of it, that's what I wanted. That's where the story came from for me. I think as it grew, it sort of became also an opportunity to look at the idea of going towards our fear, I guess, how much people try to make a new life by running away from their broken heart, thinking they're going to move to a new city and become somebody new, or that they can leave a marriage and they're going to become somebody new, and that we always, wherever you go, there you are. Eventually you have to face yourself, and that takes incredible courage to kind of go back to those emotional breaks in your history. And it's not something you can entirely do by yourself. You've got to reach out sometimes, and that's the scariest step you can take. And not trying to answer all the questions, but just kind of explore one small moment, important formative moment for these two characters as they kind of try to mend their relationship.
Earlier you used the word redemption. And we definitely, I think, feel it for, father and daughter, but the father's girlfriend, I think, has a redemptive moment. I think, obviously, I don't want to spoil it, but there's redemption for almost every character. How important was that to get those in? Because I think you guys dive much deeper than just a father-daughter story or, a couple that breaks up and where they go from there. But there's a lot of interesting interweaving stories that you guys got to touch upon. Was that always in the script? Was that always your idea and goal? Because I think we see it on screen.
I really appreciate how thoughtfully you watched the film. Thank you. I did always want it to explore the web of relationships that we live in. And most of our dramatic stories on film, etc., focus on a main character on a singular journey. And I think that fulfills a lot of our American fantasy about kind of taking charge of our destiny, making our own way. But our real lives are lived in the context of a lot of relationships, and each one affects the other. So, the daughter's relationship with the dad is impacted by how she relates to her mom, and her relationship with her boyfriend is affected by how she relates to her dad. And so It was definitely a challenge in the writing process, but I always did want to convey that sense of the webs and how sometimes it feels like you have to break with one relationship to mend another. But if you trust your heart that is moving in a healing direction, it can improve a lot of different relationships, rippling out from there. So I didn't want to make a good guy and a bad guy. I think that's a lot of what we experience is when there's a breakup, a divorce, whatever, somebody gets vilified. I think it's like endemic in our culture right now. We want to vilify people who don't agree with us. And everybody's a human being in there with longings and disappointments and grief. And when you can find that place to connect, you can kind of write the story in a different light. So at different times, different people come across as a bad guy. But hopefully by the end of it, each one of those has sort of been inverted in some way or another.
We're leaving one important cast member out. Tell me where you found Roscoe. That's the real dog.
That's right, name. Roscoe.
Because that old dog's adorable. And then where his name comes from in the title, that whole. I'm interested in that. Where did that come from?
So Roscoe, the cast member, came from Austin, Texas. Not far from you. Yeah. So he's a Texan, and we're hoping he'll have a Texas premiere here soon in a festival. We've got our fingers crossed in the running for one there. Roscoe came to us after searching for just the right dog with a lot of other animal casting services, mostly in Los Angeles and New Orleans. Given our trajectory, I was working with possibilities there, but the dogs I saw were a little too perfect. They were not that old, and I just wanted a dog that felt like the kind of dogs I'd grown up with, a dog that had some miles on him and wear and tear and was legitimately old. And I reached out to this trainer I found in Austin, and they pulled Roscoe out of retirement. He hadn't done a film in 2 or 3 years because that arthritis was real. He was 14 when we shot the film, and he had his own air-conditioned van and a lot of careful handling because it was really hot where we were. But he was just the genuine article. I mean, you can't replace that kind of old dog relationship, that I wanted. And he was a magical presence on the set. He was like a deep soul. And I think to the story point of how pets, both fill in for us when humans disappoint us and aren't there for us, and also how he, don't want any spoiler alerts here, but the role that he plays in connecting the characters behind the scenes that we find out at a certain point felt very true to life to me. So I wanted him to kind of emerge from the back seat to the front seat as being, an important character. I forgot the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
His name.
Oh, his
Thrasher,
name.
Yeah.
I wish there were so I actually live on Thrasher Road.
Okay.
And so that's a name that's very common in my part of New England. There was an artist who lived on my property, actually, 100 years ago, named Harry Thrasher. Was supposedly a wonderful guy. He died in World War I.
Oh, wow.
But so he's kind of a local art hero in our parts, was very beloved. But I didn't really know much about him when I named it. I just thought Thrasher, I wasn't following the skateboard thread on that. I learned about that later. And it's not a slasher movie either. I'm sorry that it rhymes with that. But I just thought thrashing about, I thought that would be a cute puppy name. And I've always named pets for places where I've lived.
Oh, very cool.
So that's part of it. What I also learned is that the mockingbird is in the Thrasher family, and the song that is the bonding song between Hank and Chloe around their baby is called Mockingbird. It's a lullaby that one of my dear friends in Brooklyn wrote, and all through the film is a motif of birds. So Thrasher is a family of birds, and the idea of migration, migratory birds, and bird songs, and a mockingbird, as the folk tune goes that my friend Pete wrote, learns the songs from every place he's been. And that's the motif of Hank and Chloe, is that they travel this journey and they bring the songs of every place that they've been. and that leads them to Mississippi and the sort of heartland of American music. So Thrasher also connects to the bird motif.
Very cool.
In music.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I didn't know that. So I asked this about Allison, so I'll ask it similar to you, Samantha. Melanie, in particular here at Oxford, really looks for strong female-driven directors, producers, films that are made by women. And as someone who's in that has to wear those different hats, what can you say to young female filmmakers about how to do what you just did, the kick-ass feature film job? Because I don't think, obviously mainstream's a little bit further behind, I think, the festival world, the indie world. But what lessons would you partake to folks?
Again, I appreciate your question so much. I think for young women filmmakers, my main, I don't know if advice is appropriate. I have as much to learn from them. But I think it's time for us just to really tell our authentic stories and not be focused on, like I think generations ahead of me felt that they had to conform to the expectations of filmmaking and building careers that fit male lives and male bodies. I'm a mother. It took me a while to get to my feature film because it was really important to me to start my family, and that was a choice I thought might make it impossible for me to make a feature film. But that choice also gave me the depth of the humanity that I bring to my storytelling. And if we're going to really open the playing field for women to participate, let's make it possible for them to live their full lives. Whether they choose to have children or not is a different thing, but that we shouldn't be hiding any part of our life experience. We should be looking for the opportunity it gives us to understand the human condition more deeply, embrace everything that happens to you in your life, and try to resist the either or of I've got to do this or, and sacrifice that. That when I look at male filmmakers, they're not so often looking at their lives as having to make those compromises, and neither do we. But sometimes we put that on ourselves, and I think changing audience taste so that we have a wider range of stories takes time. So I would like to sort of continue to link arms with all the women and good men in the world who are saying, we're missing out on a vast swath of good storytelling when we have such a narrow mold of what we consider box office. The truth is that even big, more industry films helmed by women actually have a higher box office return on average than films directed by men, and there aren't as many of them. But when people put forward the argument that, well, women-directed films don't do as well at the box office, it's actually not factually true. It's just that we don't have the opportunity as often. So I think the role of the festival is really important for continuing to push that door open. And I feel like it's a really exciting time. It's becoming normalized to be a woman filmmaker, and that's something to be hopeful about.
Very cool. So I've got to ask, obviously you're immersed in film world, you're immersed in your team, but I know you direct theater. And do you find yourself leaning now, wanting to do another feature, to do short? Do you want to go back to some theater work? As far as your trajectory, where's Samantha going to go from here?
Well, I always try to follow my heart to the story that is calling me, and I do have another feature film that I'm in the process of writing. And it's the first time that I'm co-writing a feature script, and it's also the first time I'm writing based on true events. So it's a really new, interesting, creative challenge. But I'm very excited about that. It's set in New York City and upstate New York, and it's about a homeless man who became instrumental in an activist movement to change redemption laws. And so it's got an environmental component, and it's got different people from different walks of life needing to come together to accomplish something really important with a really compelling main character. I also am doing theater this summer. I'm doing a kind of social media, new media interpretation of Julius Caesar that'll be live theater but also live streaming. So what we're calling extended theater. So I was interested in looking at how politics are, a lot of people are looking to Shakespeare to help us try to understand the political moment that we're in. But I'm really interested in the power of the crowd, the power of the audience, and what we're discovering through social media as the ways that we actually are influencing politics with so much more power than we have ever had before because of these tools. And I think that's all sort of written into Julius Caesar. So, but with these tools, we can do theater in an interactive way that will, and it's a local theater, and so it's a chance to just really stretch my wings creatively without, big budget like a film.
Wonderful. A modern look at Julius. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, lastly, Samantha, how can we keep track of the film? And, where can we find more info if we want to, and for the audience to know how they can see this film? Yeah,
great. To keep track of Thrasher Road and see where on the road we are, our website is always a good starting point, thrasherroadmovie.com. We're on Facebook, just Thrasher Road, and we're also on Instagram. And we have another Mississippi Festival after this one coming up, and we have maybe a Texas one, we're hoping. And we are also in the process of seeking distribution now, so we'll be letting people know on those different platforms how to see it, maybe at their local theater, and certainly streaming as soon as we know where it will be.
Well, I definitely hope it gets theatrical just so that they can see that beautiful Super 16.
Yeah, well, I hope you can come tonight and see it on the big screen here.
Definitely.
Great. Thanks.